The first time I saw my sister's name on the trauma board, I thought I was hallucinating. It was 3:11 the morning. Rain was still dripping off the ambulance bay doors. My scrub top was half zipped, my hair was twisted into a loose knot, and I was already running through the likely injuries before the paramedics even rolled the patient in. Single car crash, female, mid-30s, hypotensive, possible internal bleeding, routine, except for the name, Monica Woulette. For 1 second, the hospital disappeared. Not the sound, not the lights, not the chaos, just my sense of time. It snapped backward so hard I could almost smell my parents' kitchen in Hartford again. Burnt coffee, lemon cleaner, my mother's perfume, my father's silence, my sister's voice, always a little too smooth when she was lying. "Dr. Woulette?" My charge nurse said beside me. "You okay?" I set the tablet down carefully. "I'm fine," I said. "Prep or two. Call Patel as backup." I heard the ambulance before I saw it. Then the doors burst open. Monica came in pale, strapped to a gurney, blood soaked through the left side of her blouse. Oxygen mask. Neck brace. Her head tilted at an awkward angle from the jolt of transport. One hand hung off the rail, limp and blood-streaked, and behind the gurney, frantic and gray with fear, came my parents. 5 years. That was how long it had been since they last spoke to me. 5 years since they blocked my number. 5 years since they returned my letter unopened. 5 years since they believed my sister when she told them I had dropped out of medical school, disappeared with some unstable boyfriend, and thrown my future away. 5 years since I stopped being their daughter. My mother was still in slippers. My father had on a flannel shirt buttoned wrong at the collar. He looked older, smaller, but panic had not changed his voice. "Where's the doctor?" he shouted. "Who's in charge here?" My trauma nurse stepped in front of him. "Sir, you need to wait outside the bay." "The doctor," he said again. Now. The doctor was 6 feet away from him, gloved and gowned, with my name printed across my chest. He did not look at me. That was almost funny. For most of my life, not being looked at had been my role in that family. There were 2 daughters in our house, but only one of us ever seemed to light up a room in a way my parents cared about. Monica was older by 3 years. She was polished, social, quick on her feet. Teachers loved her. Neighbors remembered her. Cashiers smiled at her. She could walk into any room and leave with admiration in under 5 minutes. I was the quieter one. Not shy exactly, just less performative. I liked science. I liked order. I liked knowing how things worked. At family gatherings, Monica told stories at the table while I washed dishes no one asked me to wash. At school, she got praised for charm. I got praised for discipline. One of those things impressed my parents. The other did not. By 14, I knew the family script by heart. Monica was bright. Monica was graceful. Monica was easy. And me? I was serious. Sometimes difficult, though usually only when I corrected something that was false. I learned early that facts do not win against family mythology. The first time I saw that, clearly, I was in 8th grade. I placed second in the state science fair. The same weekend, Monica had a community theater performance with one line and a pink dress. My parents went to her show. When I came home with my ribbon, my father glanced at it and said, "That's good, Irene." That was all. I stood in the kitchen holding the ribbon so tightly the metal pin bent in my hand. My mother never asked what my project was about. I told myself it didn't matter. That if I kept going, if I got good enough, serious enough, undeniable enough, one day they would have to see me. For one brief stretch, I thought they did. When I got into medical school, everything changed. Not all the way, not cleanly, but enough that I noticed. My acceptance came in April. Oregon. Across the country, far enough from Hartford to feel like oxygen. My father read the letter twice before he set it down. He looked at me over the table with something close to surprise. "Medical school," he said. "A real one." My mother actually smiled at me. Not the distracted smile she used when she was only half listening. A real one. She called my aunt that night, then 2 neighbors, then my grandmother. For 1 week, My achievement was the main story in that house, and Monica hated it. I did not understand that then. I understand it now, because that was when she started paying attention to me. She called more, asked questions, wanted details, classes, schedules, professors, roommates. She sounded warm, curious, proud, even. I had spent so many years getting scraps from my family that I mistook her interest for love. That was my first mistake. My second was believing truth would protect me. The ambulance team rattled off Monica's vitals as they transferred her to our table. BP 80/50, pulse 140. Positive fast in the field, distended abdomen, left-sided bruising, possible splenic injury. I nodded, already moving. Type and cross 6 units. Or now. Monica's eyelids fluttered, but did not open. She had a deep cut near her hairline. Her skin was cold. Through the glass, I saw my parents being redirected toward the waiting room. My mother kept turning back toward the bay. My father shoved a hand through his hair and said something I couldn't hear. Then, through the noise, I caught it. She's all we have. Not our daughter. Not our girls. Just that. She's all we have. I looked down at Monica's blood on my gloves and felt something inside me go very still. I had heard worse things in my life, but some sentences arrive late and still manage to land exactly where they were always meant to wound. I scrubbed in alone. Then I called Dr. Patel. I have a conflict, I said. Patient is my sister. I'm disclosing and documenting. I can operate, but I want you present. He did not hesitate. I'm on my way. That was one of the things I loved about the hospital. Facts mattered here. Process mattered. If there was risk, you named it. If there was blood, you found the source. If there was damage, you repaired what you could and documented what you couldn't. Families were not like that. Families let people bleed for years and called it loyalty. When I pushed into the operating room, Monica was already prepped, draped, monitored, barely holding on. I stood over her while the residents waited for instruction. For a few seconds, she wasn't my sister. She was a body in crisis, and that was the only reason I could save her. Scalpel, I said. 5 years earlier, I was not in an operating room. I was sitting in a plastic chair beside a hospital bed in Portland, holding a paper cup of vending machine coffee that had gone cold 2 hours before. My best friend, Sarah, was sleeping in pieces. That is the only way I know how to describe it. She wasn't resting. She was breaking in shifts. 20 minutes of shallow sleep, 10 minutes awake in pain, then nausea, then silence, then the sort of exhausted drifting that looked peaceful from far away and unbearable up close. She was 30, funny, stubborn, and dying of pancreatic cancer. We had met in our first year of medical school when both of us were too sleep-deprived to form complete sentences and bonded over flashcards and bad coffee. Sarah had grown up in foster care. No real family. No one steady. By third year, we had become each other's emergency contact without ever formally discussing it. When she got sick, things moved fast. When she got worse, they moved faster. I took a formal leave of absence from school to care for her for 1 semester. It was approved, documented, signed, clean, temporary, everything proper, everything official. I told Monica because she had spent the previous year acting like a sister I had always wanted and never had. She listened while I explained the leave, Sarah's diagnosis, the dean's approval, my plan to return in January. Her voice softened. Oh, Irene, she said. I'm so sorry. Don't worry. I won't upset Mom and Dad with this. You focus on your friend. 3 days later, my father called. He did not ask if it was true. He did not ask for context. He did not ask a single question. He informed me that Monica had told them everything. According to her, I had dropped out of school months earlier. According to her, I had been lying to everyone. According to her, I was involved with a man who used drugs. I was ashamed to come home, and I was manufacturing excuse after excuse to hide how badly I had ruined my life. I remember standing up so quickly the chair tipped over. Dad, no, I said. That isn't true. I'm at the hospital. I'm with Sarah. I took an approved leave. Monica had apparently prepared them for that too. He said she would have a story. My father told my mother. Not even really speaking to me. Then my mother got on the phone and did something worse than yell. She sounded hurt. Not confused. Not conflicted. Hurt. As if my guilt was already settled and my only cruelty was making her hear it out loud. "How long were you planning to lie to us?" she asked. I pressed my hand against the wall. "I have the paperwork. I can send it. I can give you the dean's number." My father came back on the line. "Don't call again until you're ready to tell the truth." Then he hung up. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. That was all it took. I called back immediately. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I called the next morning. Blocked. Then my mother blocked me too. Over the next 5 days, I did everything a reasonable person could do. I sent emails. One short, one long. Attached the leave documents. Included the dean's direct number. Included the hospital social worker who could verify Sarah's condition if privacy laws allowed. I mailed a handwritten letter. It came back unopened. My mother's handwriting was on the envelope. I asked my Aunt Ruth to intervene. She called my father. He told her to stay out of it. Later, she called me back, quiet with anger. "He said you made your choices," she told me. That sentence broke something in me because it was so familiar. Not the exact words. The pattern. The speed with which Monica was believed. The ease with which I was dismissed. Every smaller version of that moment from childhood was suddenly visible at once, like holding a transparency to the light and realizing the image had always been there. This was not a shocking new betrayal. It was the same old family dynamic with the volume turned all the way up. On the 6th day, I stopped calling. People like to imagine a dramatic turning point there. There wasn't one. I just understood. My parents had not been tricked into loving the wrong daughter. They had been handed a story that made their favoritism easier to defend, and they took it. That truth was uglier than the lie itself. Sarah died in December. I was with her. Afterward, I sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by medical bills, soup containers, and the strange stillness that settles into a room the moment a person no longer exists inside it. I opened her anatomy textbook to return a bookmark and found a note she had tucked into the pages. Her handwriting shook, but I could still read it. "Finish." That was all on the front. Inside, she had written, "Don't let the people who never saw you decide who you are." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I re-enrolled. No family, no help, more loans, more shifts, less sleep. I went back because Sarah was dead and because I was not. That was reason enough. Medical school did not care that my parents had erased me. Residency did not pause because I cried in supply closets. Surgeons do not get to operate by emotion. They get to operate by endurance. So I endured. I finished school on time. No one came to my graduation. I matched into a surgical residency in Connecticut. Not Hartford, but close enough that the air felt familiar in winter. Close enough that old memories started showing up in grocery store parking lots and gas stations and church signs. I sent my parents one more invitation when I got married. It came back unopened. Again. By then I wasn't shocked, just tired. My husband, Nathan, watched me hold that envelope for a full minute without opening it because we both already knew what was inside. "Do you want me to be angry for you?" he asked gently. I laughed once, though it didn't sound like laughter. "Someone already is," I told him. He took the envelope out of my hand and set it face down on the counter. Nathan was the first person who loved me without asking me to soften the truth for his comfort. He was a civil rights attorney. Patient in the way only people with real discipline are patient. He did not talk too much. He listened all the way through. We got married in my mentor's backyard on an October afternoon with 30 people and string lights and one empty acre where my family should have been. Aunt Ruth came. She cried enough. For 3 generations. By then, I had learned something important. The people who show up become your real history, not the ones who share your name. In the OR, Monica's blood pressure crashed. Pressure's dropping. I know. Suction. I found the source. Splenic rupture. Active bleed. More damage than I had hoped. Less than I had feared. We moved fast. My hands did what they always do under pressure: clamp, cut, repair, reassess, adapt. There's a strange mercy in surgery. Everything urgent becomes simple. Stop the bleeding, protect the organs, keep the patient alive. No one asks you to relive your childhood in the middle of a hemorrhage. No one asks whether love was distributed fairly in your house. They just hand you the instruments and trust your skill. That trust steadied me. 3 hours passed without my noticing. At 6:42 a.m., Monica was alive and stable. At 6:49, I stripped off my gloves and looked at myself in the reflection of the scrub room window. Then I walked toward the waiting room. The waiting room was too bright. Hospitals at dawn always feel dishonest to me. The fluorescent lights erase the hour. The coffee tastes scorched. Everyone looks pale and overexposed, as if grief should have softer lighting than it does. My parents were sitting side by side in molded plastic chairs when I walked in. My mother stood first this time. Her eyes found my face, then dropped to my badge, then shot back up. The sound she made was not a word, more like breath colliding with disbelief. My father rose more slowly. For a long second, he did not move at all. He just stared. I let him. Then I said the only thing I could say in that moment. Your daughter is out of surgery. She had a ruptured spleen and significant internal bleeding. We controlled it. She's stable. I used the professional voice. The one families hear every day in hallways like this. Calm. Precise. No excess emotion. No invitation. My mother took one step toward me. Irene, not doctor. Not Dr. Willette. Not even a full sentence, just my name. It should have broken me. It didn't. It just sounded late. Very late. I gave a small nod. Yes. My father looked down at my badge again as if it might change under pressure. Chief of Trauma Surgery. The words sat there between us. Solid, undeniable. Monica had apparently not built a version of events that accounted for this. He started, then stopped. A surgeon, I said. Yes. My mother put a hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook once. We thought. I know what you thought. Not sharp, not loud, just true. My father's face hardened instinctively. I saw the old reflex return, the need to regain control by narrowing the frame. This isn't the time. I almost smiled. He still thought he could decide what counted as the right time. I folded my hands in front of me so they would not reveal anything else. No, I said. The right time was 5 years ago, when I called 14 times in 5 days, and neither of you picked up. My mother's head jerked up. I called. I continued. I emailed. I mailed you a letter. I sent proof. I asked Aunt Ruth to speak to you. My father looked at the floor. My mother whispered. I never saw any proof. That landed exactly as I knew it would, because in that sentence was the first crack. Not guilt, not apology. Recognition. Recognition that the story they had lived inside was incomplete. I kept going. I took an approved leave of absence to care for my best friend while she died of cancer. I re-enrolled the next semester. I graduated. I completed residency. I got married. You were invited. My father closed his eyes. My mother made a sound like pain. I did not raise my voice. Facts do not need volume. That was the difference between me and Monica. She had always understood performance. I had always understood evidence. Before either of them could speak, the ICU nurse came to the door and asked me to sign off on a medication adjustment. I took the clipboard, signed it, handed it back, and when I turned again, my parents still looked as if the room had tilted under them. That was when my mother reached for me. It was reflex. Grief reflex. She lifted both hands as if she could close 5 years with one desperate motion. I stepped back. Not dramatically, not cruelly, just enough. Her hands stopped in the air, then dropped. That hurt her. I could see it, but some pains are instructional. I had spent too many years being taught that my discomfort was the price of peace. I was no longer paying that bill. I need to check on my patient, I said. Patient, not sister. That word hit my father harder than anything else I had said. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I left them there under the bright lights with the coffee smell and the weather report muttering from the television above the vending machines. As I walked down the hall, I heard my mother whisper, "What did we do?" For once, no one answered her. A few hours later, Monica woke up. I entered her ICU room alone, except for the nurse charting by the door. She looked terrible, which I say with no satisfaction. Trauma strips people down, not just physically, spiritually too. Vanity doesn't survive a near-fatal bleed. Neither does certainty. She saw me and frowned through the anesthesia haze. Then she saw my badge. Then she read my face again. The confusion passed almost instantly. What replaced it was fear. Not because I was angry, because I was real. "I'm your attending surgeon," I said. "Your operation was successful. You'll recover." She swallowed and tried to wet her lips. "You're a doctor." "Yes." "The chief?" "Yes." I watched her do the math. Years of lies. A life invented in my absence. A reputation maintained by distance. And now the whole structure had crashed into the most visible proof possible. I had not disappeared. I had risen. She looked toward the door where our parents were visible through the glass, waiting to be let in. "Irene," she whispered. "I can explain." I looked at her drain output, checked her chart, adjusted the blanket at her side. "You don't need to explain it to me," I said quietly. Then I nodded toward the hallway. "You need to explain it to them." I left before she could answer. That was not mercy, it was strategy. The truth is heavier when people have to lift it themselves. I was not in Monica's room when everything finally collapsed. I learned most of it from my aunt, some from the ICU staff, and one devastating detail directly from my mother weeks later. But I know enough. When my parents entered the room, Monica cried immediately. Not from pain. Not entirely. From instinct. Crying had always worked for her. Softened edges, redirected blame, made everyone rush to comfort before they had time to question. My mother, I was told, almost fell for it again. Almost. Then my father asked a single question. "Why did you tell us she dropped out?" No accusation in his tone yet. Just disbelief, trying to stand up. Monica said she had been worried. She said I had sounded unstable. She said I had pushed everyone away. She said she was trying to protect them from disappointment. That last line might have held if it were not for one problem. I existed. Not as rumor. Not as memory. Not as a girl who once wanted to be a doctor. As the surgeon who had just saved her life. My parents had looked at my credentials with their own eyes. They had heard the ICU nurse call me chief. They had watched staff defer to me in the hallway. Performance collapses quickly in the presence of proof. My father pressed harder. "What about the letters? What about the calls? What about Ruth?" That was when the story started slipping. Monica tried to pivot, said maybe I had contacted them later, said maybe there had been misunderstandings, said maybe she had only repeated what she'd believed at the time. At the time, that phrase was the mistake. Because according to Aunt Ruth, who arrived 40 minutes later carrying 5 years of receipts in a leather tote bag, Monica had known the truth long after the time. Ruth did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She placed printed emails on the rolling tray table beside Monica's bed. My leave documents, my re-enrollment confirmation, a photo of my graduation, a copy of my wedding, invitation. Then, last, screenshots from Monica's own texts to Ruth over the years. "Don't tell them about Irene's residency. It will only upset Mom. Dad doesn't need more stress right now. Let sleeping dogs lie." Every text was a brick. Ruth laid them out one by one. She had kept them because, unlike the rest of that family, Ruth knew Monica's charm often arrived dressed as concern. My mother sat down hard in the chair by the window. My father, according to Ruth, did something none of us had ever seen him do in a family conflict. He went silent. Not stubborn, silent. Not angry, silent. Shocked, silent. The kind that happens when pride finally runs out of places to stand. Then came the detail my mother told me later with tears streaming down her face. There had been one more lie. One, none of them had challenged because it fit too neatly with the version of me they already found convenient. Monica had told them I refused to speak to them because I was ashamed. ashamed of failing, ashamed of disappointing them, ashamed of becoming a burden. And because my parents had always found me easier to neglect than to understand, they accepted that story too. They had not just believed I was gone, they had believed I wanted to be. That lie mattered because it relieved them of responsibility. It turned their abandonment into my choice. That is what made it useful. When my mother found the last email I had sent before my residency graduation, she apparently read it 3 times. I remember that email exactly. I don't know if you'll read this, but I graduate tomorrow. I still wish you were here. I never stopped being your daughter. My mother said she felt sick when she saw it. I believed her. Pain is not redemption, but sometimes it is the first honest thing people offer. By late afternoon, I had finished my shift and was heading back through ICU when my parents stood as soon as they saw me. They looked different from the morning. Smaller, yes, but not because age had caught up with them in a single day, because certainty had left. My mother was the first to speak. Irene, please. That word again. Please. Not because she had suddenly become wise, because the balance of power had finally changed and she could feel it. I am sorry, she said. I am so, so sorry. My father stood beside her, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who had spent a lifetime trusting his authority and had just discovered authority is not the same as judgment. I let the silence sit. Then I said, I believe that you're sorry. Both of them looked relieved too quickly, and I corrected that immediately. But being sorry is not the same as repairing what you did. Relief vanished. Good. I had not survived 5 years of silence to become easy at the exact moment I finally had. Leverage. My father swallowed. What do you want us to do? That question would have meant more if he had asked it 5 years earlier. Still, it mattered that he asked it now. I looked at them both and felt something surprising. Not triumph. Clarity. Clean. Almost cold clarity. I want time, I said. And I want honesty. Not panic. Not guilt. Not whatever this is right now because you're standing in a hospital and the facts are visible. I want real accountability. My mother's eyes filled again. I know, she said. I don't think you do. Not yet. I glanced through the glass toward Monica's room. Your daughter is recovering. When she's stable, she's going to tell every member of this family the truth. In writing. Not a version, not a softened one. The truth. My father nodded once slowly. And you? He asked. I took a breath. I built a life without you. I said. A full one. I am not the girl you stopped answering. If you want any place in that life now, it will be on my terms. That was the line, not because it was dramatic. Because it was the first thing I had ever said to them without hoping they would approve of it. That freedom changed the whole room. My father looked like he wanted to argue, to negotiate, to explain himself into a less humiliating position. He did none of it. He just nodded. A broken gesture, but honest. I left before the moment could become sentimental. Sentiment had always been my family's favorite substitute for change. I was not taking the substitute anymore. 2 weeks later, after Monica was discharged, I met her at a coffee shop, halfway between our houses. Neutral ground. Nathan came with me, though he sat far enough away to give us privacy. Monica walked in wearing a loose sweater and the careful, emptied-out expression of someone who had discovered consequence late in life. She sat down, wrapped both hands around her coffee. Didn't drink it. I did not waste time. Why? She stared at the table for so long I thought she might refuse to answer. Then she said, because you were becoming everything I wasn't. I said nothing. Maybe she mistook that for mercy, so she kept going. You were the serious one, the smart one. But I always thought I had time. Time to catch up. Time to matter more. Then med school happened, and for the first time, they looked at you the way they always looked at me. She laughed once, but it was brittle. I couldn't stand it. There it was, not a misunderstanding, not concern, not fear for me, possession. She had mistaken being favored for being owed permanence, and when it was threatened, she did what people like Monica do. She manipulated the room until it tilted back toward her. I also called your school, she said after a long silence. I looked up sharply. Twice. I waited. She met my eyes with effort. I tried to tell them your leave was fraudulent. For 1 second, the coffee shop noise vanished. That was lower than even I had imagined. I leaned back in my chair. My dean didn't protect me, I said. He believed the truth. She nodded once, tears collecting but not falling. For the first time in my life, Monica looked like someone who had run out of angles. Here are my conditions, I said, and I gave them. She would send a written confession to the full family group email. She would correct every rumor. She would stop using silence as a weapon and concern as camouflage. She agreed to all of it too quickly, which almost made me distrust her more. But then I remembered something important. Trust does not return because someone asks for it. It returns, if it returns at all, because time either supports the words or exposes them. I could wait. I had practice. The family email went out on a Wednesday night. 47 people received it. I read it the next morning at my kitchen table while Nathan poured coffee, and our dog slept against my feet, heavy and uncomplicated. The email was 3 paragraphs. No excuses. No self-pity. Just fact after fact laid bare. She had lied about my leaving medical school. She had fabricated details. She had withheld the truth for years. She had interfered with attempts to correct the record. And the last line read, Irene did not abandon this family. I made sure all of you believed she did. I read it twice. Then I closed the laptop and sat still. Not because I felt vindicated, because the truth, when it finally arrives in full, is quieter than people imagine. No music plays, no door bursts open. Sometimes there is just coffee cooling in a mug and morning light on the counter, and the strange emptiness that follows a battle you got too used to. Fighting. The replies came in waves. An aunt apologizing for repeating gossip, a cousin saying he didn't know what to say, my grandmother leaving me a voicemail so furious at Monica she forgot halfway through to ask how I was and had to call back. No one staged a dramatic family reckoning. That would have been easier, probably. Instead, something more durable happened. Monica stopped being trusted. And for a woman who had built her entire identity on being instantly believed, that loss was devastating. My parents started counseling. That was my condition, and to my surprise, they followed it. Not because they were transformed overnight. They weren't. Change that arrives too fast is usually theater. But they went. My mother adapted first. Of course she did. She had spent years confusing peacekeeping with goodness, and once someone finally named that habit clearly, she had nowhere left to hide from it. My father resisted. Then he kept going anyway. That mattered more than easy tears would have. 3 weeks into therapy, my mother sent me a handwritten letter. I opened it at the same table where I had read Monica's email. Her writing looked shakier than I remembered. She did not ask for forgiveness. That was the first sign she was finally learning. Instead, she wrote, I failed you long before the lie. I failed you every time I saw you waiting and told myself you were strong enough not to need me. I failed you every time Monica's ease became my excuse not to look closer. I read that sentence several times. Then I placed the letter in the drawer where I keep the things that have shaped my life. Sarah's note. My wedding invitation returned. Unopened. A photograph from residency. And now this. Different category. Same weight. My parents did not become different people overnight. That is not how real repair works. My father still spoke too abruptly when he was uncomfortable. My mother still reached for emotional shortcuts when she felt ashamed. Sometimes they apologized in ways that centered their pain instead of mine. Sometimes I had to stop them and say, no, try again. They did. That was new. And new, I had learned, is more valuable than perfect. The first time they came to my house for breakfast, snow was falling outside in loose white pieces that melted on contact with the porch rail. My mother brought shortbread in a tin. My father brought orange juice because he still did not know what to do with his hands when he felt vulnerable. Nathan opened the door before I could, and I watched from the stove as my father stepped into my kitchen and paused. He looked around slowly, at the framed wedding photo he had not been in, at the diplomas on the wall, at the dog circling, hopefully, underfoot, at the life he had missed. Then he asked, with a stiffness that almost broke my heart, "Can I help with anything?" I looked at him. My father. A man who had once made decisions about me from 3,000 miles away without asking a question, now standing in my kitchen waiting for instruction. Set the table, I said. He nodded. Opened the cabinet I pointed to, took out 4 plates, counted them carefully. 4. The number was small, ordinary. Nothing to anyone else. To me it felt enormous. Not because it erased the years. Nothing erases years. But because it acknowledged, finally, physically, that there were 4 places at that table, not 3. Not all we have. 4. Monica and I are not healed. I want that said plainly. We meet sometimes. Coffee. Neutral places. Short conversations. She is in therapy. She sounds less rehearsed than she used to. Sometimes she says something honest enough to surprise me. Sometimes I still catch the old instinct in her eyes. The one that looks for the easiest exit from accountability. I do not hate her. That surprises people. What I feel is more complicated and less cinematic than hate. I know exactly what she cost me. I also know that she carries the scar from the surgery that saved her life, a pale line down her abdomen that will fade but never disappear. My work lives on her body now. My skill, my restraint, my refusal to become cruel just because cruelty had been used on me. That matters to me. Not as revenge, as evidence. I did not become what they were willing to believe about me. I became someone steadier than that. A month after Monica's accident, I received Physician of the Year at the hospital gala. I almost skipped it. I was tired, and public recognition has always made me itchy. But Maggie, my mentor, would have dragged me there herself if she had needed to, so I went. The ballroom was crowded, glassware, donors, department heads. Surgeons pretending not to care about awards while caring very much. Nathan squeezed my hand under the table when my name was called. I stood at the podium and looked out over the room. At my team, at Maggie, at Aunt Ruth, already crying, and then, near the back, at my parents. They had come quietly, sat in the last row. No expectations, no claim to the moment. Just 2 people finally willing to witness what had been true for years. I kept my speech short. I said that 5 years earlier I had nearly lost the version of myself that believed endurance meant something. I said I had learned family is not only blood but also behavior. I said some people choose you more faithfully than the people who raised you. Then I paused, looked toward the back row, and said, sometimes the truth takes a long time to arrive. That doesn't make it weak. It just makes it patient. When the applause started, my mother covered her mouth. My father stood. Not because I needed him to, because he wanted to. That difference is everything. I am 32 years old. I am a trauma surgeon. I am a wife. I am a woman who built a life brick by brick with people who showed up when showing up mattered. And yes, slowly, carefully, imperfectly, I am allowing myself to be someone's daughter again. Not because they earned instant access, because I control the door now. That is the part people misunderstand when they hear stories like mine. They expect revenge to feel satisfying. But revenge would have kept me tied to the worst version of them. What changed my life was not making them hurt. It was becoming someone who no longer needed their permission to be whole. Truth did the rest. And the morning I walked into that ER room, with my sister bleeding out, and my parents waiting for a doctor they did not know was me, the title of our family changed forever. They had cut me off over her lie. Then I walked into her ER room, and I did not disappear. I was the one holding the scalpel.